Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. I have another week's worth of meals for you. I just want to apologize in advance. I have a little bit of a head cold, so my voice kind of sounds a little bit off this week. So the very first meal that we are going to get started with is some chili. This recipe is my go-to recipe for really cold days. It comes together so quickly and it is amazing. The original recipe was a Pioneer Woman recipe, and I got it years and years and years ago, and I have since kind of adapted it to how it works for me, but I have left the original recipe linked for you guys in the video description. I decided on this particular night, instead of using the ground beef that the recipe actually calls for, we have some venison in the freezer. We were gifted some from a friend and we really love the taste of it, so I decided to actually use that in this recipe. I completely forgot to turn the camera on when I was actually browning it up. So what you want to do is get a medium-sized saucepan and just ground your meat up. You're going to use either 2 pounds of ground beef or whatever other meat you want to use in this chili. I actually did not use 2 pounds. I just decided to use 1 pound of meat because we honestly don't eat a lot of it, and the 2 pounds makes a huge batch of it. So I grounded that up and cooked it until it was completely browned, and then I actually added a couple teaspoons of minced garlic into that as well while I was cooking it, and some salt and pepper. Now what I'm doing is taking a pint-sized jar of my home-canned black beans and home-canned red kidney beans, and I'm just rinsing them really well. So to this recipe, you are going to add a quart-sized jar of tomato sauce. And what you can do, there's two different things. You can use like one of those pre-made chili mixes. That's what I'm doing here. I just make my own. So I decided to use a couple of teaspoons of that. If you don't have the chili sauce, you can add in 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon ground cumin, 1 teaspoon ground oregano, 1 teaspoon salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. You just want to stir all of that in. Then you're going to take your rinsed beans, so your black beans and your kidney beans. You can use pinto beans in this as well. We just love black beans, so I like to use those. You're just going to stir it in, put the lid on, and then you are going to let this cook for about 1 hour. Now I noticed when I was stirring this that I did not have enough tomato sauce in it because it does reduce quite a bit. So I came in and added another pint of my plain tomato sauce. So that is just no seasoning at all, just plain sauce. So you can add whatever you like to this chili. If I have it available, I will add bacon in this, I will add black olives in this, I will add sliced jalapenos in this. It is completely endless. This is such a good base recipe just to kind of make it your own. On this particular week, we had a huge cold front come in, and this is actually when we got our first frost. So this meal was really, really appreciated. Just a nice, hearty, heavy, warm meal. I like to top my chili with a little bit of shredded cheddar cheese, some cilantro, and some sour cream, but it was delicious. The next meal I am super excited to share with you. This was a meal that I had no recipe for. Stephen was actually gone this particular week, so I had free range to kind of make whatever I wanted. I love it. I tend to eat a little bit more differently than he does. I'm very, very vegetable heavy, and he is more of a meat and potato guy, which there's nothing wrong with that because I do love meat and potatoes also. Anyways, this particular night, I decided that I was going to kind of make a quiche up. I am not a fan of quiches that have like the pie crust in them. I love crustless quiches. So this particular night, that's what I was doing. What you see me just doing there was I was grounding up a pound of Italian sausage. I believe it was a mild Italian sausage, so it had a little bit of heat, but not too much. These are just some beets that I picked from my garden. Like I said, we were getting that frost come through, so I was really trying to harvest everything out of my garden. These beets have been planted since March. So some of them were not in good shape. I actually could only use one of them. The one that I'm actually peeling right here was the only one that I was actually able to use. The other ones, they had just been in the ground way too long, so I ended up giving those to the chicken. So I'm just peeling my beet really, really well here. I'm gonna get it rinsed off. The other thing that I have an overabundance of, you see it there in the background, is these sweet dumpling squashes. I kind of had this vision in my head of just kind of incorporating all of these root vegetables into this quiche. So I'm just cutting up my beet here into little tiny cubes, like little bite-sized cubes, and just putting them into a bowl and setting them aside. I have my oven preheated at 400 degrees. What I'm going to do is actually roast these vegetables first because they are more harder vegetable. I know that they kind of need to be a little bit pre-cooked before I put them into the quiche because I don't want to crunch in a hard squash. So I'm just cutting up my sweet dumpling squash here. This was really hard to peel. It was so delicious, but just really hard to peel. It's almost like a sweeter version of a butternut squash. It's really, really, really good. I got the seeds actually from M.I. Gardner, so I'm going to be growing these again in the future because they were really good. So I'm just slicing them up into 1-inch cubes. I'm going to add them all to that bowl, and then to that bowl, I'm going to add probably about a tablespoon of avocado oil, just some salt and some pepper. I went out and also picked some fresh herbs. So I have some just plain sage there, and I'm just kind of cutting it up a little bit with my hands, and then a couple sprigs of fresh thyme. I'm going to put those on a lined cookie sheet. I believe those took about 25-30 minutes to cook. You just want them to be fork tender. So while they were in the oven cooking, I was getting my egg mixture all ready for the quiche. Because I do a crustless quiche, I really like to have more egg in it. So I usually use approximately 7 to 8 eggs, depending on how big the eggs are. If they're smaller eggs, obviously I use more. Bigger, I use less. So I'm just cracking them all into this mixing bowl, and then I'm going to come in and add 2/3 cup of whole milk. If you don't do dairy, you could definitely add an alternative milk to this. It doesn't really make a difference. I just love the whole milk. I decided to add some mushrooms. I had some mushrooms in my fridge that were going bad, so I have 3 huge, I think these are baby bell mushrooms. I just got them at Sam's Club. And I'm using a little bit more of that fresh sage, and I'm just going to mince that up a little bit also. Because we are making a crustless quiche, you can kind of use whatever dish you would like to use. I just had this really pretty tart pan, and I thought it would be perfect for this. So you just want to lightly oil your pan. I just use a little bit of avocado oil there. I am just going to add in my pre-cooked meat. So in this case, I just use that Italian sausage. You're going to add in your veggies at this point. So I'm going to add in my uncooked mushrooms. You could even saute them if you wanted additional like flavor to it. They would probably be really good sauteed with a little bit of balsamic vinegar or maybe even red wine. It would add another flavor dimension to this, but I didn't do it. I just put them in raw. And then I put in my thyme and my sage. I'm just going to stir it up a little bit. My vegetables were done cooking and they were nice and fork tender, so I'm just going to add those in as well and then just stir everything together. Now when I make quiches, I love cheese. Like, I am a huge cheese fan, but for some reason in quiches, I am not a super fan. So I added a little bit of shredded cheddar cheese to this, and then just some salt and pepper to taste, just because the vegetables were pretty bland, so I wanted to season it up a little bit more. So for the cheddar cheese, I probably ended up in total, like with the top and the middle, I probably ended up using about a 1/4 cup of that. So once you get all your veggies stirred together and your cheese in there, you are going to add your egg and milk mixture and just make sure that everything is kind of incorporated. And then if you want to top it with some more cheese, this would probably be really good with like a flavored smoky cheese on top of it also. You're going to put it in the oven, and you are going to cook this for approximately 35 to 40 minutes. I kind of do like a little bit of a jiggle test when I'm making quiche, just to make sure that the center is not jiggly. You want everything to be completely set. So this was the meal. I ate leftovers every single day after this. I had it for lunch and I had it for dinner. It was so delicious. For the next meal, Steven still wasn't at home, so again, I got to kind of do things that I normally wouldn't do. He, for some reason, doesn't like chicken pot pie. I think it's the peas in it. He's not a fan of peas, so I usually don't make this when he's home. So because he's gone, I am making up a couple of batches of it. So instead of using the boneless, skinless chicken breast, I'm actually going to use our turkey breasts. So what I did was I took about 1 pound of the boneless, skinless turkey breast and just cut it up into about 1-inch cubes. And I added it to a sauce pot. I am taking 2 medium-sized carrots, so you want to use about 1 cup of sliced carrots, and I like to finely dice my carrots. I also have my scrap bag there. That is one thing that I cannot recommend enough doing, is whenever you are chopping vegetables and things like this, get a scrap bag and just store all of your scraps in it. This is perfect for making like your veggie broths, your chicken broths, all of those types of things, and it just stores in the freezer. It's perfect. To that stock pot, I am also adding half a cup of sliced celery and 1 cup of frozen green peas. After you get everything added to the sauce pot, you are going to add water to cover, and you're going to bring that to a boil and boil it for 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes, you are going to remove it from the heat and drain it and set aside. So what we're doing in the meantime, while that is boiling, is we are going to get our other ingredients prepped. So you're going to use 1 onion, and you're just going to finely dice this onion. Now for this recipe, you need 2 9-inch unbaked pie crusts. I had some already pre-made. In last week's video, I actually showed you how I make them, and I left the recipe linked for you in this video description, but you'll have to reference last week's video to see how I actually make it. It's super, super easy. I like to usually make bulk pie crusts and then just kind of have them available in the freezer when I need them, because they come in perfect for meals like this. So you're just going to take your unbaked pie crust and you are going to shape it in the bottom of the pans. So because Stephen wasn't here, I decided to actually use 2 little ramekins that I had instead of doing it in like one really big pie plate, and then that way I can have one for tonight's meal, and I actually made a second one that I was actually just going to throw in the freezer. So you just want to get that pie crust into the bottom of those pans, or if you're using a pie plate, just put it in the bottom of the pie plate. So once those vegetables are cooked, you're going to come and strain all the liquid off and then just set them aside. So you're going to take 1/3 cup of butter and melt it into the same sauce pot that you just emptied out, and then add onion into that. You're going to cook that onion until it is soft and translucent. Once it is completely cooked through and nice and soft, you're going to come in and add 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour, and then you're just going to stir that until it's all incorporated. Add some salt, pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of celery seed to that, and then you're going to just stir it till it gets to be a nice paste. You want to cook it until that flour smell is completely cooked off of it. Then you want to slowly stir in 1 3/4 cups of a chicken broth. It doesn't really matter if you're using low sodium or not. Mine is completely salt free, so I did add a little bit of extra salt to it. After you get the chicken broth added, you are then going to stir in 2/3 cup of milk. I don't think it matters whether you're using a dairy milk or not. I have actually used non-dairy in this before and it turned out perfectly fine. So you're going to cook that on medium-low heat until it is nice and thick. Once it is thick, you are going to remove it from the heat. I also forgot to mention at the beginning, I do have my oven preheated at 425 degrees. Now that the liquid is done cooking, you're going to take those vegetables and meat that you had set aside, and you are going to fill the ramekins or your pie plate up with the vegetable mixture. Once you get it good and full, you're going to take that liquid mixture, so that's the milk, the chicken broth, the flour, onions, all of that, and then you're going to pour it over top. I like to come in and just kind of stir it a little bit, because I really do like to have the mixture just kind of mixed in throughout all of the vegetables. Just fill them until they are completely full and not overflowing, but just full enough. And then you're going to take the other pie crust that you have reserved. So I have those little top parts, and I'm just flattening it, and you're just going to cover the top. You want to seal the edges, so I like just to kind of pinch along the sides, cut off any excess dough, and then you are going to put several small slits on the top. This just allows the steam to escape so that you don't get it really bubbling over. I still cook this on a cookie sheet, because even if I put those slits in, it overflows, and I do not want to mess the bottom of my oven. You're going to cook this for about 30 to 35 minutes, or until the top of the pastry is nice golden brown and the filling is nice and bubbly. Because Stephen wasn't eating with me this night, I took that second one that I had made and I just got it all prepared. I did not cook it. I just left it completely raw. So I put the topping on. I did it as if I was just getting ready to put it into the oven, and I actually just put it into my freezer. I froze it, and then once it was completely frozen, I came in and just kind of wrapped it up, put it in a bag, and now I have a extra chicken pot pie in the freezer. This recipe actually makes more than just these 2 little ones. I actually had extra filling that I was able to put into the freezer as well for a meal in the future. But there it is, super, super delicious. For our last meal, we are going to make one of my all-time favorite crock pot meals. It is so easy to make, and it is so very delicious. We are going to make a Mississippi pot roast tonight. In order to start, you need to get about a 3-pound beef chuck roast. Mine might have been a little bit over that. You don't necessarily need to use a chuck roast. I have actually used like an arm roast, pot roast, like any type of beef roast works well for this. So you want to take that roast and you just want to season it very generously with salt and pepper on both sides. On the stovetop, get your skillet hot, add a little bit of oil to that skillet. And what we're going to do is we're just going to sear this roast on all sides. The key to getting like a good juicy beef roast is making sure that you have a good sear on all sides of it. It kind of locks in that moisture. My cast iron was a little bit too small for this size, but I made do. So what you're going to do is put that roast into the crock pot, and then you are going to add 1 tablespoon of dried onion flakes, and then it says 1 packet of ranch seasoning mix. I don't buy the ranch, I make my own. So what I did is I just put 2 tablespoons of the ranch seasoning mix into that. Next, you want to add either 1 packet of an au jus seasoning package. I didn't have that, so I just used a brown gravy seasoning pack that I actually got from Azure Standard. Then you're going to put in 6 tablespoons of butter. It says unsalted. I always use salted butter. I just like the flavor of it way better. Now you want to add your pepperoncinis. This is completely personal preference how much you actually add in. Most recipes recommend that you add about 6 to 10 peppers and then just leave it at that. I like to add the whole jar. These are my canned peppercini peppers, and this is probably the only reason I can pepperoncinis is just for this recipe. I love it so much. So I add the whole jar of pepperoncinis in there, and I actually add some of the juices as well. You want to add a little bit of salt and pepper to taste. If you are using like a packaged ranch dressing, I would actually maybe not add additional salt to it because I have made it with packaged ranch dressing before and it was way too salty. So that's why I actually started making my own ranch dip, was just because I found that I can control the salt level with that. I have linked the video below where I show you how I make all of my dry seasoning mix. I have like a taco mix, the ranch mix, it's all in there. So you want to set your crock pot on to low and you are going to cook this for about 8 hours. You're looking for the meat to fall apart. One thing that I decided to make, I had actually decided to join my husband on his work trip, so I was gone for 4 days and I did not have any bread in the house. Usually I like to have a nice fresh loaf of bread to go with this Mississippi pot roast, but because I was gone, I didn't get a chance to make any sourdough. So what I'm decided to do is make one of my favorite cornbread recipes. This is an Amish Sour-cream Cornbread, and it is so delicious. So I have my oven preheated at 400 degrees, and I put my cast iron skillet. It's an 8-inch cast iron skillet. You can also use a cake pan for this if you would like. I just put a little bit of butter in it just to kind of melt it and get that cast iron good and hot. So to a large mixing bowl, we are going to whisk together 3/4 cup of cornmeal, 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 2.5 tablespoons of white sugar, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar, as well as half a teaspoon of salt. So you're going to whisk that all together, get it good and incorporated, and then next you are going to whisk in the wet ingredients, which is 1 cup of sour cream, 1 large egg beaten, 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and half a cup of whole milk. You can use non-dairy milk as well in this. So you're going to take your hot cast iron out, and then you're going to pour that batter into that greased cast iron pan, and then you are going to bake this on the middle rack for 30 to 35 minutes. You want to check the center of the bread just for doneness, just pull a toothpick out, but I have found that 35 minutes is perfect for cooking this. So once it's done, you're going to remove it from the oven and you're going to let it rest for 10 minutes. So there is the pot roast. It is pull apart deliciousness. It is so good. This is, like I said before, it is one of my most favorite meals. One thing that I like to do serving this pot roast is I actually like to make some mashed potatoes and just serve it over top of the mashed potatoes. I had gotten some carrots from my local Amish this particular day, so I made up some of those. So this is the last recipe for this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope I gave you a little bit of inspiration for the upcoming week of meals. I hope you guys have a great day or night whenever you are watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.